So it was really intentional about like when we went to market, let's be intentional about the user experience, the product offerings of its subscription or not, what's defaulted as subscription, what's not, how do we do refills and is that cheaper than one time? Like being really, really thoughtful about that from the very beginning. Because once you start, it's really hard to go back and change everything.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Shizu Okusa, founder and CEO of Apothékary. In this episode, we discuss her experience as a repeat wellness entrepreneur, Apothékary's approach to East meets West herbal remedies, plus we talk about bootstrapping growth, expanding into offline experiences, and developing science-backed supplements. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. To learn more, head to fitt.co/JackTaylor. That's fitt.co/JackTaylor. Shizu, welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, it's so good to be here. And thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have this chat, both to have you here to share your story, but also talk about the way in which you've gone about now a multi-time kind of wellness entrepreneur. So for folks who aren't familiar, maybe just give them the quick introduction about what you're working on, how you got there, and we'll get to it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to start with like the resume virtues and then the eulogy virtues of my life, but I'll start with the eulogy side. I guess I was born and raised in an immigrant family in Vancouver, Canada. I went to college there called UBC, and I by accident stumbled into this program in finance where I then started my first career in Wall Street. So I was working at Goldman Sachs as a trader for 3 years, and I got burnt out and just like didn't see any sunlight and vitamin D. And I was like, there's got to be more. And so the shift from Wall Street to Well Street was really, a time of change, and industry was also kind of like waking up to health and wellness at the time. This is like 2011, 2012. I left Wall Street, traveled around for the world for about a year and a half and lived in Mozambique in Africa, and then moved to Bali for 3 months where I learned about Ayurvedic medicine and cold pressed juicing, and then moved to DC having like literally no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I started a job in private equity at the World Bank. And I was like, God, how did I come back to doing the same thing I left? And I just started juicing on the side. And, like Uber Eats didn't exist, Instacart didn't exist. And it was just like the best way to stay nutritious and stay in health when pressed for time. And so we were one of the largest cold pressed juice brands based in the DC area in Maryland, Virginia. It was called Drink. And did that for 9 years. And of course, there's so many stories to share of that 9 years, but really think that was focused on the physical health of side of world. And then started Apothékary, which we call Mother Nature's Pharmacy, and really focused on the mental health side of the world and stress and sleep and skin and all the things that our world currently affects our bodies today. So that's really kind of who I am today, what we've created.
Yeah, an incredible journey, as you put it, from Wall Street to Well Street, and also very well timed, right? With like this explosion and continuous growth of the wellness and now holistic wellness mindset. People obviously thinking about, maybe in some cases obsessing over how to achieve all these different dimensions: physical, mental, stress reduction, burnout, all the pieces that kind of go into that. You mentioned working and building the juice company for 9 years and now starting Apothékary. How long has it been working in this business? When did it launch, and what type of thought process, planning, reset, or was it just jumping right into this thing that led to, hey, I'm ready to kind of like get back out there and give another run at being a founder?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And, what's so interesting, I think, is the founder journey is you start something and you're so focused on it and I was like singularly focused. And then I think what happens over a period of time as a founder, you turn into a builder and you turn into like an operator or CEO moment. And I think that there's often this tension of founder and CEO. And frankly, I'm still going through that right now. But what happens is it becomes a lot more process driven and it's not as creative. And you can't be as curious as you used to be because you can't make as much change as fast. And so what I found was like my sort of, I hit the wall after 8 or 9 years with drink of like, I'm not innovating anymore. I'm not doing what I do best. I don't have the creative juice literally in what I do. And so there was a point in time where I just realized like I'm not going to do the best service for this company anymore. And I think that was actually 2, 3 years too late. And we ultimately got an offer that we declined at the time when we were about to open a Whole Foods location. I regret not taking that offer, but it is what it is. And we have ultimately still sold the company, but it was such a hard, difficult time because when we sold the company in 2019, I had an earnout and was still involved in 2020. And then COVID happened and we closed all of our stores for drink while Apothecary was founding and started in January of 2020. So I was running two companies at the same time, one of which was like dying and one of which was growing at a pace that I couldn't keep up with. So it just felt like I had one arm up here and another arm dragging me down. And I was just like not at all like I couldn't do it. And I look back as those moments as truly like the foundation building for I think what we were doing. But Apothecary is really everything that drink wasn't, and drink was everything that Apothecary wasn't. In that it's shelf stable, the shelf life itself, the margins are better. We can ship globally, so impact to me was really important, so that every ounce and every email, every product we were coming out with could scale and frankly hit more people and be valued around the world versus just in a local area of like one juice store because we couldn't get product elsewhere. So that was really, I think, one of my biggest realizations from venture 1 to 2 was how do we make impact scalable, and then how do we work smart and not hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, the kind of comparison between the 2 and certainly applying those learnings, but just like what works, maybe what scales, how do we do this in a way where, we can distribute this product much differently than having to like actually cold press all the juices and them not being shelf stable. When you set out to do this, I mean, the the kind of supplement space is very crowded. There's a lot of, you know, hype and marketing. There's a lot of misconceptions. There's just a full spectrum of like what is in a product we don't know, like low quality to like super high quality. Obviously, you wanting to focus on like the pharmacy, spelled with an F, pharmacy, and plant based medicine. How did you like carve out where you're going to go in that industry, knowing that like it is very crowded? It can be very difficult to kind of break through and stand out.
So when we first started drink, the bottles were in glass. And I think in wellness, packaging is so, so important. And so when we first started with drink, at least it was cold pressed juice, it was glass, you could see what's inside, and it was very grocery like product. And for Apothecary, what happened for me was that at least like juice wasn't going to solve my stress or my sleep. If frankly, if I took it, I probably would hurt my sleep. And so I was thinking about, okay, well, how can I actually support my sleep without using melatonin, valerian root, all the things that you would find at CVS or Walgreens? And then on top of that, all the packaging that you would see in a pharmacy was, in plastic bottles and in pill form. Everything's on sale. You don't recognize the ingredients. There's all these things that like the grocery stuff has moved, 10 years ahead of pharmacy and supplements. And as much as the market for supplements has been booming, nobody is really getting to the root cause and problem of that industry. And I felt it was the packaging. So we came out intentionally with glass jars that are after our rebrander, our custom mold. They're refillable now. You can see all the ingredients inside. And our secondary packaging also has a hole on the side, which was also really intentional so that you can see inside. So that when we launched in retail, like in London, for example, and sell fridges, now that everything is on the shelves, people might not, well, they won't open the box just to see what's inside. They can just turn it to the side and peek in. So packaging was very, very intentional about the user experience and making sure people knew exactly what was inside. Because again, the supplement space is so, frankly, excuse my language, but like garbage to some degree. Um, and we wanted to bridge the Eastern medicine world with the Western modern day customer, and that's what they're seeking.
It's really cool. It was, I think early on, what I would think of as like early on versions of the product and now newer versions of the product, and seeing the evolution of the brand, of the packaging, the presentation. It was always very much geared towards, as you kind of put it, like problems, right, that maybe you felt like you were having that you wanted to solve, sleep, mental health, stress, things like that, that obviously a ton of people have that same problem. So there's a huge market for it. But then just kind of like framing it in a way where it is very kind of the names themselves are like very solution outcome driven in terms of like what you're taking, why you're taking it, which is also a big kind of shift in the supplement space, but also in terms of like how people are thinking about their own well-being. As someone who, you were on Wall Street, you had a previous exit as a founder, you could early on go out, raise money, figure out how to get to any VC you wanted to, think about building the company and scaling it quickly. But you've kind of taken the opposite approach, which was very community driven, right? All these buzzwords about how you're intentional and, build with your customers and all these sorts of things. It's like you actually did it and executed on it. To what degree, like, did you set out to say, like, this is how we're going to do it from the onset? And what was that strategy to say, like, okay, we have these products, here's how we get them in the hands of people that we think will find value with them, but to be able to get feedback, to build authentic communities. I think all the, like I said, all the things that people aspire towards, but like nobody quite talks to like the execution of actually doing it.
It's something I think about a lot because we're in the process of closing an internal round right now. And as with every round that you do, I think you're always thinking about the future round and how this one will impact that future one or a potential exit. Just because you're thinking about all the things, right? Voting rights, ROFRs, like liquidation preferences, and you're forced to think about these things that you've never had to think about in operating the business of like, oh my God, what happens if we go bankrupt? What happens if we sell the business? Then what's the waterfall of the money and where does it go? What's pref versus common? All those things, right? And so this is actually our very first priced round. Our business will probably do a little bit over 25 million this year, but like to have our very first price round happen now, I think is actually quite different or weird, or I don't know if weird the right word. It's not common. And I think most people look at us and are like, "Oh, you've been um doing the like junior like the rookie way of finance and invest, raising capital." Like that's kind of what I would get is like, "Oh, she's too scared to raise big dollars and go big." I actually think like we were talking a little bit offline about this. I just fundamentally have never found a venture fund that I truly believe is in line with the pace of growth and pace and space of wellness. Because I think the forced capital infusion of growth and hitting these quarterly numbers, there's just so many other numbers and non numbers that we look at to see the health of our customer and our products and our business that I can't put into a PDF or Notion and a board deck and have that really be understood. And so part of that was raising capital from investors that just truly understand that and or wouldn't have a vote or veto to be like, no, you can't do this right now because we want to see more ROI quicker. Because we're not in it for a quick exit. And it's funny because I was on a retreat last week that was completely 7 days offline, and it was a meditation Vipassana. And during that moment, I think I had the most creative moments of my life in the last 12, 13 years because it was my first vacation in 12, 13 years. And in that moment, I was like, wow, I don't think I could have done this if I had a venture capital firm breathing down my neck right now. And I wouldn't have the space to totally disconnect and reconnect with our mission and what we are doing. And so I think that just being so intentional about the money and who's around the business and who's around the CEO in particular is so important because you are the oxygen that you ultimately breathe into the company.
Yeah, it's such a great point, and I often feel that way when I'm wearing my investor hat, where it's like I know what it's like from the founder perspective, having been a founder that raised venture capital, like what it's actually like for them and what is the right decision for me, investor, for the company is not the right decision for them, the founder of the company. And I think that's very rare that you get that combination from a lot of investors. And it's very rare that they will come out and tell you that. Like we've had to sit there and say, like, look, this is obviously what we wish or hope or would like to see happen, but like you can't do that because it's going to kill the company or it's going to put you in a bad spot to make decisions that ultimately aren't going to serve where you want to go. And it's important, obviously, from your perspective as a founder to be able to have that realization and set out to build the company in a way where you're maintaining the control, yes, but also kind of the flexibility to have that decision making. And I think as true as it is, right? Like it's a great spot to be in that you're doing 25 million in revenue and you get your price round at that time. It might make things more challenging. But then there's that question of like, okay, but how did you get from 0 to 25 to be able to like have all of that flexibility in the decision making essentially to, you know, when you have customers, when you have revenue, they're your investors. Like it's better to have them than it is to have people coming in and buying parts of the company. So talk about like getting those first customers, actually getting the product out there, like getting the validation like, hey, this is working and we can do this. And like, I know you raised angel money and had obviously investors around the table, but really bootstrapping growth like in a way that has become atypical.
A third of our business is subscription. So when we first launched the company, we were very intentional about making it a win for the customer, but making the business self sufficient. And so by having negative cash conversion cycle, you're able to fund the business, quite dramatically and bootstrap that by yourself. Especially if you have annual subscriptions because you get paid up front for an entire year. So it was really intentional about like when we went to market and no learning from drink, especially in particular, was when we come out with these products, let's be intentional about the user experience, the product offerings of its subscription or not, what's defaulted as subscription, what's not, how do we do refills, and is that cheaper than one time? Like just being really, really thoughtful about that from the very beginning. Because once you start, it's really hard to go back and change everything. And so that was definitely something that we learned. And I think using credit and using really, really smart ways of growing the business versus equity versus debt was also really important. So when we first started, we had a 500K line of credit. And that was a relationship from a bank that we had through my first company. But, a lot of people can get lines of credit. And if you can get a loan to start and purchasing your inventory, I think that's where the most of the dilution usually happens is raising for inventory. I just fundamentally have never understood why founders raise money and dilute their equity to buy boxes. Like it doesn't make sense. So I think being very, very clear around your capital structure and the types of capital and like product market fit, it's security market fit and making sure that the security you're raising on makes sense for the market that you are serving or whatever it's for. So that was really, really intentional. And we're still 90% direct to consumer. We have a very, very small percentage is Amazon and wholesale. And we intend to stay this way through, investing in tech and personalization and herbal regimens for people. And then soon coming out with experiences that are offline. Because I think what's so interesting about the wellness industry, I think for us at least, we're focused on the tech side and then we're focused on the offline side. And so it's a really, really weird fork in the road moment, I think, for what we're doing here and the experiences that we're building over the next 12 to 24 months, because we're really focused on not doing these product, launches that are just $2 million, but like, how do we do a $20 million launch and like really thinking about like scalable solutions for people. Yeah.
At this point, I want to talk about that a little bit more from an experience perspective. How many SKUs are like, what does that look like? How do you think about like expanding that? You talk about, $2 million product launch. Like, so what are we kind of selling now and what does that look like as it continues to grow? And then I'm going to talk about the offline piece that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. The offline's my favorite, by the way. But yeah, anyway. So on the product, we have like 47 products. So that goes from sets to tools to single herbs like ashwagandha and maca to signature formulas like mind over matter, chill the F out, to tinctures. So we're literally trying to build the pharmacy where we have so many different formats that we can customize because what we found that there's treatment gaps between powders versus tinctures. There's potency gaps between powders versus tinctures and everything too. So you can't just offer one thing for one need and cross it off the list, mainly again because there's the potency factor, and most people don't talk about that enough about herbal products, because if you have a tincture that's distilled in alcohol, most likely you're not getting a full spectrum tincture. That usually means that you're not getting the full benefits of the herbs versus when we do it, we distill an alcohol and then we evaporate the alcohol and then we preserve it with glycerin. So it has a natural sweetness to it, but it doesn't have any alcohol in it. And it's also full spectrum. But that means it's a little more expensive, but people don't recognize that. So we have to do a ton of education around it. We're actually one of the first to market with a glycerin tincture for that very reason, is it's more expensive. But our product roadmap is very, very focused on sort of quicker relief, and coming out with like 7 to 8 different tinctures over the next 6 months or so, and then a new format coming out after that that actually has not ever existed in the US. So we're really, really excited to bring it to the US. Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. Little kind of tease on this. Not quite ready to be released yet. We'll keep an eye out. And so, to this point, you mentioned focusing on subscription, focusing on direct to consumer, doing some retail. Know you launched in London. How do you anticipate that retail side in terms of whether it's a percentage or just the emphasis that you're placing on that?
Yeah, I think retailers are honestly still also trying to figure out wellness. Like, at least our category, we've had Whole Foods reach out, we've had Target, we've had Sephora, Ulta, Vitamin Shoppe, CVS. Like, we're talking pharmacy, food, skincare, and there's no, and it's actually very confusing as a brand because you're so pressured and you have a desire to say yes to everything, but we've actually said no to everybody. And I don't know if that's the right choice. I'll be honest. Like, I don't know. But what I do know today is that without education, the products aren't going to move. And so, at least for at least what we believe, what we are selling, and if the product can't get the right education behind it, then we're just investing in product that's not going to move, and then we'll never get paid. And thus it's just not a good timing. So for us, we've said no, but not right now versus never. So I think it's probably in a year or 2 years from now, when we're going from early adoption stage to a little bit more mass market. And that is, it's happening at a pace that, frankly, I think we're all very, very surprised by. Sober curiosity is one of our biggest customer formats that we hit now with our tinctures and wine alternatives. But again, like, we're not a wine alternative company. People just are looking for better stress solutions, and then they find Apothékary.
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high growth companies, and really invests in building long term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fit Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. To learn more, head to fit.co/Jack Taylor. That's FITT.co/Jack Taylor. Now back to the show. I think this point around, I guess I haven't thought of it this way, but to hear you talk about it, like in retail, it's in my mind mirrors a lot of what's happening in when you think of like fitness and gyms now becoming recovery, now becoming massage and spa, and like all of these elements that are part of like this holistic view of wellness that some places have figured it out better than others, but then also you have new formats that are just dedicated to wellness or just dedicated to recovery, and figuring out where those all merge from the like exercise seeker. This is the version of that for like the broader health and wellness seeker, where it's like when I walk into Whole Foods, like, am I thinking about stress relief? Am I thinking about, obviously I know they sell supplements, but like, am I thinking about tinctures and, you know, just everything that you have to offer from the apothecary side? I don't know. And certainly Target hopes that they can sell more of this type of product, but is that the right place for it to be happening? So I don't know that there is like a good solution, at least right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's funny. So I got off another press like interview thing a few hours ago, and the subject is the wellness is for quitters. And I thought that was really interesting because I was like, oh, it's for quitters because it's people that want to quit alcohol. They want to quit sugar. They want to quit coffee. They want to quit smoking. They want to quit laxatives and energy drinks and Celsius and all that. And so it's actually more of a person that's saying, no, I want something better. And so if you go to Whole Foods, you're not getting the no, you're seeking already something out. And so I think that's why paid search is doing so well for wellness, is people are seeking it out, because it's not given to them right now. And so if that's the case, then I don't think that it's retail necessarily where customers are buying this. And it is such a personal thing to share. I am stressed because I am having, I don't know, I haven't slept for 9 days and my hormones are out of whack. I'm dealing with this at home. And like, you're never going to get that care at Whole Foods. So that's where I think it's this intersection of preventative healthcare that mirrors that sort of doctor pharmacy like kind of interaction, but you don't have to kind of go through all the bureaucracy of that.
Yeah, and it's the same on the flip side with the healthcare environment where you're like, yeah, like, yeah, gym and health, like, I'm not getting it here. So, like, where am I going to find this? And then to your point around search, like, people are having to figure it out themselves, and they're finding it through friends and word of mouth and referrals. And they're finding it by saying like, look, if I don't figure this out, like, I'm going to be in a bad spot, and I'm going to continue to be in a bad spot. And I don't want to feel this way any longer. Um, so yeah, there's as much as there is this continued kind of proliferation, especially from obviously my standpoint, and you were deeply immersed in it, like, there still are these gaps where it's like, oh, how are we reaching these people? How are they interacting with it? How do we solve these problems that they're having? um, and maybe that's a segue to, you talked about the importance that you just went on a retreat yourself. You talked about the kind of offline experience, um, reaching people maybe where they are, or building something for them. How are you thinking about going about that? What does that look like?
Yeah. God, I gotta say, like after 7 days of not having a schedule or having a schedule made for you where it's very simple. We woke up at 5 a.m. with Tibetan chimes. I have never had that where like my phone wasn't just like blaring in my face 10 times. But it was like Tibetan charms, and he'd wake you up every morning at 5. We stretch at 5:30, and then we'd meditate basically for hours, or be in nature basically. But what I realized after it all, after 7 days, the TLDR was like, I have never felt my most truest self until the very end of that, because it strips away, the no makeup. There's no brands, there's no social media, there's no FOMO, there's no LinkedIn, um there's no things that are coming at you that you feel like you need to be or should be. And I feel like everybody needs that. And I feel like we all just want to be seen and understood in a way that is our rawest and most natural self. And so with apothecary, when I think about nature as medicine and everyday healing becoming second nature, I always think about like, how do we just immerse people into nature and disconnect? And the stress solution is there. The skin solution is there. Just by being in nature, like you tune out and you absorb like abundance. You're not in contraction mode, you're in expansion mode. And you just come back just feeling so much more full. And so I think that's where, I'm trying to figure out that sort of intersection between what we offer and how we can bring offline experiences around nature in a more approachable, and maybe it's a walking meditation series. Like we're coming out with this series called Nurture Your Nature, and it's all about nurturing someone's own most natural selves and guiding them through that, combined with some of our product. But like, it's really important, I think, that people can take some time out during their day, weeks, because that nervous system reset is so powerful and it's completely free.
The idea of creating that thing, basically, we talked about retail. Is that the right way to interface with people? Is that what we want to create? Is that how we want to bring people together? So creating these experiences maybe that align so well with the brand, align with what people are seeking, is an interesting way to go about doing this in terms of not only marketing, but like extension, like brand extension, category extension. And in the supplement space, you know, there's, in the last, call it what, 5, 8 years, you see like uh care of, like, there's like a personalization, right? They send you the packet of like your own thing, and like somebody like Ritual is like ingredient like transparency, and they tell you where things come from, and they're very clear about what's on the package. And now this idea of like building, I don't know if you think of it like lifestyle brand, if you think of it as just embracing or promoting like back to nature, simple solutions. Like, do you think of it that way? Or do you think of like, hey, this is just a natural extension of how I live, what I've seen, and what I think would be valuable to people?
I think it's going to be it's an extension. It'll be the next chapter of this brand where we're actually creating wellness retreats and experiences for people and plant medicine journeys that are not psychedelics, that are not mushrooms, but plant medicine journeys, as in like, for example, I'm Japanese, so my aunt is a Japanese Chado instructor, which is matcha, and like I would love to bring people to actually experience the natural way that matcha is harvested. And as much as it's a hype ingredient today and it's all the cafes, how much do we really know about, like, it's from a tree? It's matcha's not grown from the ground, it's from a tree, the leaves. And there's actually a meditative practice around making matcha that has been used for centuries and thousands of years, and kind of bringing that as a cultural side of what we do. And again, we've talked about East meets West has always been sort of the apothecary, how people view us. But East meets West can be so many other things outside of just tangible products. It can really be the rituals and routines that we do. In Japan, there's something called Lajio Taiso. In Japan, it means radio fitness. So what that looks like is at 5 in the morning, your entire neighborhood, they'll ring the bell at the school, and before school starts, everybody goes with families and adults to the park, and there's really loud radio that plays the fitness, like, okay, stretching, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And they go through stretching together as a community for 30 minutes every morning, and then they go home. But it was like the first thing that people do when they wake up. It's community, there's talking, people grab coffee after, you're moving your body, it's free. But like, that is the exact kind of experience that we have been missing here in the Western world. As much as we're making a lot of money, a lot more time, and a lot more connection, man, I feel like we're more disconnected than ever.
Yeah, it's true. I think that part, again, I could just go back to like the positioning of that as like, hey, we this is part of the solution that we want to deliver to people. And like, yes, it is all of these herbal and plant-based remedies, but like this is part of a bigger ritual, routine, lifestyle that if we just do this one part over here, like it's great and maybe we can sell some products and it'll be a great business, but like it's not going to be this kind of like holistic, vision maybe that you set out to build, or the things that you saw maybe lacking that you felt like, hey, we can fill this void for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's at least my journey with entrepreneurship too. It's I don't want to be just CPG anymore. Like we've been there, done that. Look at you guys. Like you guys have flourished, and from newsletter to then was like telling people where to go, and now it's capital, newsletter, job postings. Like the world wants more from you guys, and you guys are delivering that. And I think we also have a responsibility from our side as a company in wellness to like deliver the 5-year roadmap of what we want to offer our people, even though they may not know it, that they want that at that time. And that's our job.
Yeah, it's exciting to see it all take shape. A couple more questions before we get you out of here. With that, building this roadmap and now starting to think about how it all comes together, and really to some extent sounds like really going for it, like really going big and going forward and like bringing this vision to life. Have you gotten any pushback, any questions? You mentioned from the raising a price round now and kind of more traditional VC where it is, you know, hey, how do we quantify this? What does this look like as we set out to have retreats and, bring people together? Have you gotten pushback? What kind of pushback? And is that like complicating things? I think for when you want to, some people might want to look at it and be like, no, this is a CPG company, and like here's what the metrics say, and here's what the acquisition costs are and payback is. Like, let's just keep it in this spreadsheet.
That's a really good point. It's funny because our investors don't know yet. This is literally something we've been like conceptualizing for the last quarter, and in particular fueled from my like last retreat. But I moved so fast that we're like now already planning out like our Japan trip for next year with media and such. But that's exactly why we're raising from these kinds of investors that don't actually have that voice or don't care too much, because They trust the process. They know that wellness is not going to be this one spectrum, one chapter, one road. And it's actually quite important that we diversify, I think, our streams of revenue and or how we're approaching customers, because ultimately that will bring down CAC from a 360 perspective. So we have not yet gotten pushback there. We have gotten pushback in the past around like brand investments around like a pop-up. We were going to do a 3-day pop-up at Shopify, for an example, but it was going to cost us $150,000. One of our investors was like, "No, you can buy a house with that." I was like, "Yeah, it's true." And there was no like clear ROI with it. So we inevitably just kind of scratched the event. And I don't really, part of the idea of founder and entrepreneurship is just moving on fast. So there's no, yeah, I don't feel one way or the other, but I do think that there comes a point where you do have to be a little more careful around, is this a test or is this actually an investment? Because I think those are really, really different things.
For sure. I think that's a good point. And then the other question I had was around, and I often ask this to other kind of operators, entrepreneurs in the space, because I think it's something that both personally and business wise, I find myself coming back to and thinking about like, what, if any, like thought process do you have around like, hey, does this whatever it is, wellness, work scientifically? Does it work? Is it a placebo? Does it work because it just makes me feel better? Like, is it some of all of those things? And then how do you navigate that as it relates to the business? Because, again, and I'm kind of projecting here. I oftentimes I look at things and products and investments and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, and like I know it will resonate and I know it checks all the boxes, and like I know it's going to be a huge success. Like, do I need it? Do I do I want, like, how do I do that and where does that fit in versus like, no, very clearly by the demand that you see for customers, by the impact you've seen in your own life, like this is a solution to something people are looking for. Do you think about that? Is it a factor, and maybe to what extent, if it is?
Yeah, it's really it's actually a very timely question, because and it kind of ties a little bit into your earlier question around products, but every year our hero SKU has changed. And I'm not sure exactly what that means yet, but for example, when we first launched the business, Chill the F Out, which was like this cacao stress blend, that was our number one. Number two product in the second year was called Stop Your Whining, which is our red wine or herbal alternative in powder form again. And then in the third year slash like going into this year, it's been Take the Edge Off, which is our white wine alternative. It's a tincture format. And what I find every year is that the first year customer is then going into the second year customer, and then they're the third year customer. So it's almost like this early, like that's the retention cycle. Is like they try one product, then they're going into the second one, and now they're at Take the Edge Off. So we're almost like bringing the customer along this journey that they never knew that they needed or never knew that they had. And so all to say that I think this product iteration has been one of the most surprising things for me over the last, yeah, like 3 to 4 years. And now we're finally investing in clinical trials. But what we've been able to do, I think, is to your point around science, is using consumer data to then back the next product. And then before we launch a product, now that we have capital, we're like, our R&D cycles anywhere from 6 to 9 months. So the first 2 months are like ideation, blue sky. What do we want this to be? What's missing from a treatment gap perspective? And then month 3 to 4 is testing and third party testing. So bringing it to our co-mans to be like, okay, here are the ingredients. Now we have to go through the FDA compliance process of testing and third party validation and certifications. And then once we have this, so those COAs, we can then actually, we own the formula from all of our co-packers, and then we are in production mode. And then it's just about a finance question about funding. But really, the clinical trials also take somewhere between 3 to 6 months if it's a double blind placebo test. So we're investing in those now as well. But we don't think we need to do one for every single product. We'll probably just do it for our best sellers. But ultimately, if you do one or two, it's also a halo on the brand. And it's really an ethos question. I think it's up to the founder. We like to say we're very hard woo. So meaning that there's a spectrum of woo woo out there where there's like soft woo, Mercury's and Gatorade. I'd like to say Gatorade. And then we're in hard woo where we're not in Gatorade. We're very focused on like science and speaking the language of our customer, which is like the worker, the educated young professional in finance or consulting, wherever they are, and making sure we're delivering in the way they speak. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a great answer and a great place to wrap up. And just that you have figured out and continue to like come back to not only what is true to you, but also the customer and people who are obviously experiencing a whole host of whether it's problems, issues, not feeling like they're achieving their best or feeling their best and kind of filling that void. And I think the way I feel like I've said it a couple times now, but like authentic and very execution focused and very like, hey, we're out here doing it. It's inspiring to see. It's exciting. And you've teased a couple things now. We talked about retreats and experiences. You've talked about a new format that's coming. You've talked about some clinical trials and stuff that you're doing down that path. Anything else people should look out for? Where would you point them? Where can we learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're hiring if anyone's looking for jobs. We're hiring a director of operations, developers, brand people, finance person, all the things. But otherwise, you can find us at apothecary.co is our website, Instagram, apothecary co. If somebody wants to get me the apothecary handle without the co, I'm a taker. And then I'm at, Shizu at apothecary.co as well if anyone wants to reach out. But Joe, thank you so much for all that you do. And Anthony, you guys are, I mean, I read every single one of your newsletters and your posts, and so thoughtful. Just the amount of work and content and hours that you guys have put in over the years, and massive, massive kudos. My heart warms up to it.
Likewise. I appreciate you saying that. We're huge fans of yours. I'm really excited to share this conversation. We'll have everything linked up below. But yeah, thanks for making some time today and thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
One more thing before you head out, help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.